Thank you all for coming. I'm going to presume that most of you that are here today, if not all of you, are caregivers in some fashion. And one thing I've always told my caregivers, my family members that I'm working with is that you're a caregiver regardless of where your loved one is. So if your loved one is at home, you're caring for your loved one at home. If your loved one is in a facility, you're still a caregiver. You're just enjoying a different caregiving experience than you might have been if they were at home. So I think it's wonderful that you're all here. I'm excited to be seeing you all in person and not via Zoom. And I'll begin just by show of hands, how many of you here are direct caregivers currently for someone? So everybody, okay, great. So give yourselves a great big round of applause first, because it is not an easy job. And one of the things, you'll see some of the slides, I put a couple little poems and anecdotes in. I think as caregivers, we're not really good about caring for ourselves. So let's talk a little bit about behaviors in dementia. This is what we're going to discuss today. We'll talk about some common behavioral issues, some potential behaviors you might see. Not everything listed here is going to be something that you have seen. There may be some things that you have experienced that aren't listed here. We're going to have a little, question and answer session after so we can talk about that. We're going to talk about addressing and understanding behaviors, and then I'm going to give you guys some resources to help you on your journey. So some common behavioral issues that are listed here. Again, it's not an exhaustive list, but it tends to be the most common things that people that are caring for someone with Alzheimer's or related dementia tend to see. Again, many different kinds of dementia. Alzheimer's is the most common form of dementia, but we have a variety of different types of dementias, and I'm certain that if we went across the room, maybe we'd hit all, if not most of them. But here are some of the more common things that people tend to experience when they are having behavioral issues with dementia. Sleep disturbances. Somebody either is sleeping too much during the day, can't sleep at night, is getting up frequently. Delusions. These are firmly held beliefs that this person has. They're not letting go of them. It's very hard to redirect them with these types of delusions. And sometimes these delusions can, they can be really tense, and we'll talk more as I sort of get to that. Hallucinations. Seeing, hearing, or feeling things that aren't there. That can be very common. Repetition, repeating words or phrases. I think that's one of the ones that sometimes drives us the most a little off the edge, having to hear the same story over again. My kids are also, they're blaming me for this right now. I don't know, I'm 48, maybe I have dementia, I don't know. But they're telling me they're tired of hearing the same stories. So it's already starting at my age. Wandering. That's one of the ones that can be potentially dangerous, okay? Especially if a loved one is living at home and there isn't constant supervision. Even sometimes a loved one is in a facility. Unless it's a locked unit, sometimes wandering can really present great challenges. Anxiety or agitation, restlessness, pacing, reliance on the caregiver. How many of us are trying so hard to care for someone and we just wish they wouldn't need us so much? Confusion or suspicion, not recognizing familiar places or faces, making accusations that someone is lying or stealing, accusations of infidelity. So these are all things that people commonly experience behaviors when caring for a loved one with dementia. So we're going to get a little bit more into the potential behaviors that people may have. What I always say is, remember that the person with dementia is not giving you a hard time. The person with dementia is having a hard time. So sometimes it gets really difficult because we want to take it personally. And I can just share a little side anecdote. So I have been an elder service case manager. I've been a social worker. My own dad and my mother-in-law both had dementia. My dad had vascular dementia. My mother-in-law suffered from Lewy body dementia. It is really difficult to be a professional in the industry and then have to put myself in a place of then being a caregiver and not take these things and the things that are happening so personally. So I've witnessed it from experience. When I talk from this place where I'm speaking, I'm not speaking just because I've read this in books or I learned it in school. I've actually experienced most, if not all, of these things. So as hard as it is to not take things personally, we have to just take a minute And with ourselves, remember that this person isn't doing it to us, they are suffering from this. So here are some things that we'll talk about a little bit more. Sleeplessness, restless sleep, okay? Somebody is getting up in the middle of the night, nighttime pacing, in and out of bed, or tossing and turning. So I think these are things that we probably see often in people. And again, in one of the other slides, we're going to talk about some of the reasons for these things. But something that we always want to remember, and I can't reiterate this enough, when we're dealing with these behaviors, the first thing that is important for us to do is to rule out any type of medical issue first. So we want to make sure that if we're seeing behaviors that are really different, really sort of off from what the normal behaviors that we see with our loved one or the person we're caring for, it might be a good time to call the doctor to make sure there isn't some sort of infection brewing or some other medical malady that's going on with this person. A urinary tract infection is, always one of the big ones. I see all the heads shaking because that's usually one of the big ones that we see, that once we get it treated, the behaviors tend to right themselves, or at least they lessen. But sleeplessness is definitely one of those things that we see in a lot of people with dementia. And unfortunately, what happens? So then they don't sleep at night, so then during the day, they're one of two things: restless and agitated, or sleeping all day. And that can present its own issues, particularly if you have a loved one who's involved in some type of day service program, going to one of the adult day care centers, because we want them to be able to enjoy themselves during the day. Unfortunately, not to make it seem like children, but it is almost like when we have children, you want to keep them active during the day so they will sleep well at night and eliminate some of the restless behavior. Agitation and aggression is a really, really big one. Sometimes people can get physically aggressive. They're hitting you when you're getting dressed. You're trying to give them medication. They're swatting it out of your hand. You're trying to feed them or help them with feeding. They're swatting the food away from you. Sometimes they're verbally aggressive. One of the things that we hear about with dementia is that people tend to sometimes, not always, I don't mean to generalize in any way, but sometimes people that were that sort of quiet, demure type of person, suddenly when they get dementia, become these angry people that swear, and I'll hear people say, my mother was never like that growing up. So, remember that sometimes these things are not necessarily indicative of their personality. I joke around all the time and say, well, that's because she wanted to when you were kids, but she knew she couldn't, and she knew she could get away with it when she was 89 and had dementia. So, it's one of those things where these behaviors, again, remember, we're not taking it personally, as difficult as it is to manage these things. The swearing one I know is a big one. I'll hear from family members all the time, Mom would have never said that. So I think for my kids, it'll be the opposite, because I'll be sitting in the nursing home quiet and not saying anything, and my kids are gonna go, that wasn't my mother, you had to hear her mouth when we were kids. Again, pacing and restlessness is also a sign of anxiety, and so sometimes some of these issues that we see with the sleeplessness can actually be a result of either internal agitation or some type of aggression. Delusions are really a big one, and these can happen really in any stage of dementia. I think sometimes we think about these behaviors collectively as happening in the later stages, but they can actually start in the early stages of dementia too, and sometimes what we'll see is these are the precursors to diagnosis. So somebody's starting to get a little more suspicious, having a belief or an opinion that they just can't let go of. These are sometimes almost like warning signs to families, because they become so occurrent and they're so hard to sort of navigate the person away from those feelings that they start to wonder if maybe they need to seek medical attention because something just isn't right. There's that feeling, something just isn't right here. A big one that is hard to deal with sometimes, you have the gentleman with dementia whose wife has passed years ago, and he still believes his wife is alive. And we'll talk a little bit about addressing those types of things in a coming slide. Sometimes it's believing the caregiver is out to get them. All you want to do is steal my money. You don't want me to live at home. You just want to control my life. I'm seeing the faces, and I hope that I'm respecting your situation that you're in, because these are common things. It's It's easy to say you're not alone, but I think looking around the room and seeing this many people that are caregivers, I hope you all get a deep sense that you are not alone in this journey. And that's why coming to a presentation like this, you're one step ahead of the game because you're already recognizing as a caregiver, you need to be supported by other caregivers. Sometimes a really big one can be people are believing that they're being poisoned. I actually have dealt with that a couple times recently with some residents at my nursing home, and that's a really tough one because you need your loved one to eat, you need your loved one to take their medication, you want to be able to do it in a way that's not going to be hurtful to them, but it's very difficult because they have this notion that they believe so deeply, and it's so embedded, and you don't know how to navigate that. And then believing that they're not home. I want to go home. How often do we hear that? I just want to go home. When can I go home? I have to catch the bus. My mother's waiting for me. My family's waiting for me. All common themes. Hallucinations, which are false perceptions, which a person believes are real. So seeing things or people that don't exist. I know my mother-in-law that had Lewy body, that was very common, and it's a common symptom in Lewy body dementia is these deep hallucinations. Seeing bugs or animals, that can sometimes not be just an annoyance, but that can almost be dangerous because sometimes people can hurt themselves in trying to avoid the hallucinations that they're experiencing. Or hearing sounds or voices. That isn't something that just is from a mental illness. That can be from some type of dementia that someone is suffering. Again, anxiety. I think there's probably not a person in this room that hasn't suffered from some kind of anxiety at some point in their lives. When someone has dementia, when they're beginning to forget, when they don't know their surroundings, when they are just in such a state of confusion, anxiety is actually the natural thing for them to feel. Who wouldn't feel anxious if they didn't think that they were in their home? Who wouldn't feel anxious if they were in a room full of people that they suddenly didn't believe they knew? And some of the things that can happen with that, again, are pacing. And the big one with anxiety, over-reliance on caregivers. How many times have some of you felt, I just need a break, I just need to get away, I just need to take a little time from me? It's really, really important that you do that. And some of you may feel, well, my loved one needs me, they have to see me, or XYZ will happen. They'll be okay. And in order for you to really be able to take care of them, you need to be able to recognize that that over-reliance is a symptom of their disease, is not something that you're doing or something that you're not doing for them, but just a symptom of their disease. Wandering is one of those things that I think sometimes can be a little controversial, particularly in long-term care settings. Some places they don't like to see people wandering. Well, we don't want them to wander. Sometimes if they're in a safe place, in a place where we're not going to have to worry about them leaving the house or going into traffic, wandering, I believe, can be purposeful. Sometimes wandering can actually relieve some of that anxiety, relieve some of that agitation. It can relieve some aggression sometimes. So as wandering can be dangerous if it's not in a safe spot or in a safe location, I feel it's something that also can be purposeful. So maybe if you have a loved one who's exhibiting that type of wandering behavior, you could have different locations wherever you are, in your home or wherever, maybe set up. If you know it's common places where they are wandering, maybe you're going to have like a memory book, or maybe you're going to have a favorite little stuffed animal or doll, something so that when they are wandering, there's sort of pivot points for them to be able to look at and engage with. Repetition, again, repeating the same phrases or repeating the same names, repeating the same story, sometimes repeating the same action over and over again. Somebody that keeps wanting to, fold clothes, or somebody that wants to keep flattening out the dress or something like that. If you see someone that is repeating a behavior and it's not creating them an anxiety, it's not creating any kind of agitation in them, it's okay to allow them to do that. A lot of times what I'll do, as an activity for somebody, I'll give them a bunch of towels or some sheets or something to fold, and then they'll finish it, and then I'll take it and I'll dump it out and I'll bring it back to them. It gives them something to do. It gives them a feeling of purpose. So sometimes those repetitive behaviors aren't necessarily bad. The repeating of the phrases, repeating of the questions, the when am I going home, where's mom, where's dad, that can be really taxing. And we're going to talk a little bit about ways that we can redirect that. And then the confusion or the suspicion, I think, is one of those things that leads caregivers to the bad place. You know, your loved one is accusing you, if you're caring for your spouse, they're accusing you of infidelity. How hurtful that is. How devastating that can be. Trying to convince that person that that's not actually happening. Here you are trying to give of yourself, care for your loved one, and they're blaming you for some type of infidelity, or you're caring for your mom and she's accusing you of stealing her money. These are all things that are enormously difficult behaviors to deal with and to manage, not just for our loved one, but for ourselves too, because again, we're only human, and it is, it's easy to want to take that seriously and to take it personally. And it's easy for me to sit here and say, don't do it, but we're going to talk about ways that you can try to circumvent that for yourselves. So almost every single behavioral change has a trigger. So somebody doesn't just start this behavior typically out of nowhere. And the most common reasons for people having these types of behaviors are pain or discomfort, overstimulation, or in the inverse, boredom, fear or frustration, unfamiliar surroundings, or a complicated task. So if you can imagine someone has pain and they can't tell you that they have pain. One of the reasons why, when I'm often talking to doctors on my medical staff, depending upon where someone is in their course of dementia, I'll recommend that those PRN or as-needed pain medications are actually given as standard, because a person that has a certain degree of dementia is not going to be able to say, I have a headache and I'd like a Tylenol. So if we can anticipate when they're having this pain, if we know that there's sort of a pattern to it, we can provide them what they need before they actually need it. Overstimulation or boredom. You know, you put somebody that has dementia in a room like this, it's a recipe for disaster, and you're really going to see some type of catastrophic reaction in most cases. So that can really create people to have really difficult behaviors, agitation. That's sort of where that physical agitation can come, that verbal aggression can come, because there is just too much going on, too much that they're taking in, and they don't know how to process that. They don't have any other way to be able to tell you what's happening, so instead they're acting out what's happening to them. But in the same token, it can be boredom. I see that all the time on my unit in particular. If people don't have enough to stimulate them, even in a small way, a puzzle, folding laundry like I just mentioned, quiet music, maybe some painting or some art, that can lead people to get frustrated as well. And that's one thing that I think sometimes we see even more than we see agitation with overstimulation, is that people aren't stimulated enough. And if their brains don't have a place to go, and their brains don't have a way to be able to really work well, then they're going to become aggressive, because all they're sort of do is meandering in their own head, and they need some other way to be able to get out their feelings. So they're going to do it with aggression or some type of behavior. When we talk about fear or frustration, I think that pretty much speaks for itself. You know, people are really fearful of what they don't know, because they don't know what's happening to them. No one can say to somebody, well, you have dementia, and so this is why this is happening to you, because in that state where they are, they don't understand what that means. And that can make somebody very fearful. Even that feeling, you know, when you have a loved one who's saying to you, I want to go home, why can't I go home? They're afraid of something. Find out, you know, what they're afraid of, and find out where that fear is coming from. You know, think back to their past. Think back to even maybe, you know, a few hours before. Did something happen? Was there some type of trigger that sort of set them off and is now making them have this fear? Are they frustrated because they can't do something? How often do you see a loved one trying to dress themselves and they can't figure out the buttons? And so think about it, you and I, when we can't do something. How frustrated do we get when we can't do something? Couple that with having dementia. Couple that with having a place inside of yourself where you don't know. You truly don't know. You're in there somewhere, but you don't know how to get out of that, and that can create and exacerbate behaviors. Unfamiliar surroundings. Again, seems like sort of an obvious one, but we decide we want to take mom to a brand new restaurant because we want to try a new place. And mom, there's sights, there's smells, there's faces, there's food. All of these things sometimes can actually just set someone off, and then we're sort of sitting there wondering, well, why did they have this behavior? Well, you put them in a place where they were unprepared to be. And is there a way that you can prepare them to be there and also have what you need to be able to live your life? That sort of becomes a difficult question. You want to try that new restaurant. Maybe trying that new restaurant might be better on a day where you don't have to take mom with you. Sometimes we have to really, we're already giving of ourselves, we're already sacrificing so much, and it can be so difficult. But we really need to meet that person where they are, because if we don't, that could be setting them off for that behavior. And again, that goes right along to a complicated task. You give somebody, let's say you decide you want to have them do an art project. A lot of times, people really need these things spelled out for them. They really need you to be able to sit down, either model for them or give explicit instructions, or do something that keep it simple. There's these wonderful, I found these really great watercolors, and they're not really, you literally use water, but they're not like kid watercolors. They're literally these beautiful paintings that actually take a long while to do, and people can get some sort of satisfaction from an uncomplicated task. So understanding and addressing some of these behaviors. These are the things we want to remember when we're coming upon these behaviors. Detect and connect, address physical needs, address emotional needs, and reassess and plan for the next time. I'm not going to stand up here and be jaded and say that all these wonderful things that you're going to do for people are going to totally eliminate all the behaviors, because we know that is absolutely not true. There is going to be a next time, but maybe the next time won't be as difficult as that first time because you'll have learned. And these are all wonderful topics that come directly from the Alzheimer's Association. That should really honestly always be your first stop in looking for resources. Right here in our state, we have the most amazing group here, the most amazing Alzheimer's Association, and that should really be your first stop in looking for any kind of resources or help in the community with caring for your loved ones. Detect and connect, what does that mean? We want to join the person in their reality by trying to see the world in their eyes. There's this whole idea, sometimes we talk about reality orientation. Anybody ever hear of that term? I don't really believe in reality orientation. I think when I have somebody that's asking for their mom and they're 95 years old, I'm going to figure out a way to either help them find their mom or find a way to help them reduce the fear of not finding their mom. So when you have someone that you're caring for, sometimes the natural reaction would be like, your mom died 20 years ago. Let's let go of that, because that isn't going to be purposeful and that isn't going to be helpful. And really, when you're looking at addressing a behavior, the first thing you should be asking yourself is what I'm about to say or do actually going to help my loved one, or is it just going to make me feel better about the situation that I'm in? That's a tough thing to do. Introspection is not an easy thing to do when we're caregiving, but I think it will be helpful in the long run. So by joining the person in their reality and trying to see things from their eyes, we can really help that person come out of wherever they are. Even if it's a situation where someone's having a hallucination or some type of delusion, ask them. So you're seeing little children running around. That was the one that my mother-in-law always had. She was a school teacher. So naturally, she was going to be seeing little children running around. And sometimes she'd be afraid of them. Sometimes she would say they had scary faces. So it was, for me, all about sort of changing the narrative. Oh, you're seeing the children. Are they going to school, Mom? Tell me what the children are doing. And if she would say they were angry or mean, I would tell her, let's look for the ones that are happy. Show me where the children are that are happy. Show me where the children are that are playing. You can sort of take your loved one along on the journey and take them away from the place that's painful for them. You know, they're looking for their mom. Tell me about your mom. What was your mom like? Tell me your happiest memory of your mom. You're not necessarily saying that her delusion is wrong. You're not necessarily even sitting with her in that delusion, but you're helping her along the way. You're holding her hand on the journey of that issue. You need to understand the person's reality in the context before intervening. Who, what, when, where, how. So again, like I said, my mother-in-law's delusion was seeing small children. She was a school teacher. What did your loved one do that might be causing them to be sitting in this place? What experience did your loved one have that is making them have this feeling or having this sort of perception where they are right now? What happened, what's going on with this person that is creating this discomfort? Because one thing I always remind people is that when someone's having really negative behaviors, that deep aggression, that verbal aggression, that anxiety, that doesn't feel good to them. So even if they're not necessarily in physical pain because of some kind of medical malady, there's an emotional pain there for them that they're truly feeling. And we need to do our best to try to figure out a way to sit with them where they are to bring them out of that pain. So we're looking at what took place before the behavior. Did they go to the bathroom? When was the last time they went to the bathroom? Are they hungry? Are they thirsty? Are they cold? Those are all really simple things that you can sort of root out right from the beginning and probably should be the go-tos. You know, thinking about, is there a medical issue going on? Thinking about the environmental issues, those sort of things, to be able to really figure out where they are. So that brings us to addressing the physical needs first. Is there a medical issue? Anytime you see an abrupt change, definitely call the doctor. See if they can see them, maybe get them some labs, things like that. We want to be as in the least intrusive manner that we can to treat the symptoms, but we also want to make sure that we're not missing anything medically. So anytime you see any kind of really abrupt change in behavior, definitely give the doctor a call and make sure we're ruling out any of those medical issues first. Again, is the person hungry or thirsty? Sometimes just offering them a drink, even if that sort of comes out of nowhere, they're having this behavior that is just so out there, and just, hey mom, are you thirsty? Mom might say, yeah. Or even just going to get a drink if you think mom hasn't had anything to drink in a really long time. Or dad hasn't gone to the bathroom in a couple hours. Just take them there. Don't even ask them sometimes, right? You ask somebody if they want to go to the bathroom, nah, it's all right, I can wait, right? That's what I'll say. And then in my head, I'm like, I really need to go to the bathroom, I just didn't want to say it, right? So with your loved one, just take them, put them on a bathroom schedule. That's another great thing that you can do. You know, every 2 hours, you're just going to take mom or dad to the bathroom, or your spouse, or whoever it is. That might be a wonderful way to sort of bring something in that is now going to sort of turn the tide on some behaviors. Another question, are they lacking social or physical interaction? Sometimes people are just bored and they really need music. They need some stimulation on the television. You know, putting on a comforting song, putting on a comforting show, that movie you've watched 500 times. Those things bring comfort to people. And even though it might seem repetitive to us, that's bringing that loved one comfort. And that's someplace where we need to try to get them to be. And then again, are they too hot or too cold? I don't know about you, but I've worked in several facilities where it is always 1,000 degrees. It doesn't matter if the air conditioning is running, I'm always warm. My residents are always freezing. They're always freezing, you know, and sometimes they're not like 98-pound little old frail ladies. Sometimes I get really big guys, 300 pounds, that are freezing. How are you freezing? They're freezing. So figure out if there's a temperature issue going on, because sometimes just putting a sweater on someone can make all the difference. Addressing emotional needs. This is where things can get kind of tough and where we have to detach a little bit sometimes. We want to focus on how that person is feeling. Your husband is driving you up a wall. If he makes that comment one more time, you are absolutely going to lose it, right? We've all been there. Even for people that aren't caring for someone with dementia. We've been there with our kids. We've been there with our friends. That's a tough place to be. But we have to, again, be thinking about that person, right? Caregiving is really hard, and you have to be really selfless. We're going to talk in a minute about how you have to take care of yourselves, but in that moment where we're trying to address that loved one's direct need because they're having this really difficult behavior, we have to try to be as selfless as possible and figure out, why are they feeling this way? What is creating this agitation? What is creating this anger in them? What is creating these delusions? Just try different things. What I would say is almost make it like a, you know, remember the old doctors that used to have the medical bags, right? Or a toolbox or something. Have this toolbox of different things. I actually visualize in my head when I'm having these issues a visual toolbox that I sort of go into and root around, and I just try different things, right? Because you may try 5 or 6 things, that 7th thing is the one that's gonna stick. Again, it is so exhausting, and I know. And it's easy for me to stand here and say all of this to you when you're in the moment and you're trying to get that person from hitting you, right? And it's really hard. We've just got to take a couple seconds to try to go back to that toolbox and figure out what can we take out to be able to help this person. Use your own knowledge of that person. No one knows your loved one better than you do. So the better that you know this person, the better you can dig down and figure out, where do I need to go to help turn the tide on this behavior that they're having? And then redirecting the energy into a more soothing activity. Again, someone is really having a difficult time, we're gonna just turn on some music. We're not even gonna talk to the person. We're just gonna go right directly to our radio or whatever and turn on some music that you know is gonna make them happy. That alone could actually shift a person's perspective. It can shift them right out of where they are. Even just sometimes just walking away. If you know your loved one is in a safe place, it is okay to say, I'm gonna come back in a couple minutes and check on you. Even if they're in the height of something, as long as you know they're not gonna be a danger to themselves or someone else, it's okay to walk away for a couple minutes, regroup, redirect, and then come back to it to sort of face it with a fresh face. Again, always making sure that your loved one is in a place where they're safe. But redirecting that energy, sometimes people feed off of the energy, right? Who's ever been with someone that's just a vacuum, right? This person is never happy. They are always miserable. If there is something to complain about, they are gonna complain, right? That is the worst kind of person to be around any given time. If we become that person for our loved one and we start to see an increase in behaviors, we probably need to look inward first and say, what am I projecting onto this loved one? Did I have a really horrible day and now I'm bringing that home? Again, you're allowed to have a horrible day and you're allowed to bring it home, but we have to find a place to make that as closed off from our loved one as possible so that they don't really start to feed off of that negative energy. So now we're gonna talk about reassessing and planning for the next time, because as I said, there'll be a next time. We know this. We're not sugarcoating things here as we're talking about difficult behaviors with our loved ones. So go back to the first of detecting and connecting. Think back. Was there an issue? Was it too cold? Did he have to go to the bathroom? Was he bored? Whatever it is, go back to that. Join their reality, don't argue it. The best way to keep somebody from coming out of a difficult circumstance when they're having a behavior with dementia is to argue the person. That's always gonna end wrong. I can't even emphasize it enough how that is really always going to end wrong. So don't argue it. Again, if you need to stop where you are and walk away for a few minutes, that's gonna give you a better outcome than trying to argue it with the person. What went well? What actually really worked? Put that in the front of the toolbox. Put that right up in the front so that you know to grab it the next time. And what didn't go well? What did you do that you look back and went, yeah, I messed that one up. That really didn't go well. And then toss that one out of the toolbox and don't use it again. You know, as a mom, I do that, well, mainly because my kids like to remind me of all the times that I've messed up. So I don't know if anybody else has those kinds of kids, but you know, you think back and say, what worked, what didn't work? Even in everyday circumstances, in your job. You know, you have a project you're working on, something worked really well, I'm gonna do that again. Something didn't work well, we're tossing that out. Same thing when you're caring for your loved one. So here's the tough part, where the onus becomes on us as the caregivers. Remain calm and resist the urge to argue. I can fully admit I am one of the most confrontational people I know. I own it, I know that about myself. I'm a work in progress, I work on it every day, but I know that's how I am. If there's an argument to be had, I'm gonna argue it. I'm trying really hard to learn to not be that way, to recognize it in me, and I think we all need to do that as well. It is really hard what you're doing, and so the first thing you wanna do is say, I am not cheating on you, why would you say that? That is so hurtful. Probably not gonna give you the result that you want. A way to turn that tide is talking to them about their relationship with you. Can you remember any of the good times we had? Do you remember any of the positive things we had? Trying to shift it. Don't argue it. Again, it's really hard, I know. It's really easy to get lost and sort of caught up in where you are. Particularly, you know, let's say you've got a loved one that goes to adult day all day, and you've worked all day. Most of the people in here are still, you guys are really young. People are probably still working here, right? So that's a tough thing to do, and I recognize that. But we've really got to dig deep to try to find a way to find that place. Provide reassurance and concern. I am so sorry that you're feeling that way. I'm really sorry that you can't find your mom. I'm really sorry that you're angry about whatever it is. Showing concern. The other thing that's super important is body language. If I come out to you guys like this, do I look like I want to be nice and talk to you? Right? No. I look like I'm confrontational and looking for an argument. The best way to approach a situation is eye contact. Make eye contact with your loved one. Sometimes, you know, you need to sort of, don't be so straight up. Don't be standing so straight up with great posture like they always taught you to. Kind of get down a little bit and make eye contact and really let your body language show the person that you care. Let your body language almost fall into the conversation you're having with that person, because that visual allows someone, and this is really good advice even when you're dealing with people that don't have dementia, body language is so key and so important and can really make or break a conversation with somebody who's having a really difficult behavior. You can agree with the delusion, you can sort of meet them where they are without leading them to a bad place. Again, investigate the environment. I cannot express enough how important that is. We may be feeling fine, the temperature might be great for us, but to be honest with you, for our loved one, it may not be. So even if it just seems like, nah, I don't know, I'm grasping at straws on this one, try and see what the reaction might be. Evaluate for immediate concerns. That should really be at the top of the list. I kind of did this out of order. That should be the first one. Evaluate for any immediate medical needs. Provide a distraction. Give them something to hold in their hand. We look at all these fidgets people have. Give them a fidget. Give them something to squish in their hand, a soft animal, a doll, something that they can actually have physically in their hands and focus on something else. Make sure the person is safe. Again, when I gave you that advice about, you know, walking away from that person, please don't do it in the middle of like a parking lot or in the middle of a crowded place where they're not familiar. We always want to make sure the first and foremost thing is making sure our loved one is safe and that others around them are safe. And then the most important thing is live in their world. Try for a moment to imagine how scary it must be to be in a place where you have no knowledge and really can't comprehend what's happening to you in that moment. That's a really scary thought. It's a scary thought for me when I think about it. I don't like to go there, but I think in doing that, it can help us really realize where that behavior is coming from and try to be mindful and really have a heart for that person in finding how to help them out. So this is my famous phrase that as a social worker I have said to every caregiver I've ever talked to. There is a reason that when the airplane is going down, they tell you to put your oxygen mask on first before the person sitting next to you. You cannot help another person, your loved one, a friend, your kids, unless you've helped yourself first. It is so important to remember self-care. And I know, oh yeah, okay, self-care, I'm the only one, I'm the only child. I've got 10 siblings and I'm the only one. I know there's a ton of you in the room like that, and let me tell you, in my entire 30-year career, I have only ever heard of one family. This woman had 6 children. All 6 of them filed in, each one with a notebook. I felt like I was in like outer space, right? And they all sat down. I'm gonna take Monday, I'm gonna take Tuesday, I'm gonna do the laundry. And I just sat there like dumbfounded. And one of the daughters said, is everything okay? I said, I've never seen this before. She said, you what? I said, I've never seen a situation in my professional career where every child has taken a role. So those of you out there with siblings and you're the only one, I see you, I get you. I'm an only child. Yep, there you go, give yourself a round of applause. That's a tough place to be. I hope you have a good friend and a good place to be able to vent to, And we're gonna look at some of these resources because these are good places for you to be able to go to figure out how to manage the struggle that you're having. You know, we talked all day, right, about all the struggles our loved ones are having. This is the time to recognize the struggles that you're having. So first and foremost, the Alzheimer's Association. Give them a round of applause for doing this today. It's amazing. Every year, time and time again, they knock it out of the park, and they're not just there for Alzheimer's, right? It's Alzheimer's and related dementias. So they have a bevy of information. They have a bevy of research studies. Whatever you might need, the Alzheimer's Association should really be your first stop in looking for information and resources. Those of you that are trying to do it on your own, please don't. There's adult day services, there's home health care, and some of you may actually qualify for respite services. Some of these programs through the state, I have on here community action agencies. There's a table with the point. They can let you know which community you live in and which community action agency to call. There's a number of programs that financially you may qualify for to get free and reduced care for your loved one, whether it's home care, adult day services. So use those resources to try to find that out. Even if you think, oh, I make too much money, some of these programs have spend downs, where I had a woman once whose income was $89,000 a year, but she had so many medical spend downs that she actually qualified for the second tier of the program. So, you know, you don't know, I always say you don't know what you need until you need it. So find these resources and try to utilize them. The Diocese of Rhode Island has a respite program. Sometimes the money can get eaten up quickly, but again, they offer respite services and it's on a sliding scale. I mentioned the state subsidized programs. Those are through the community action agencies. The Point can help you with that. You can call 211. The Office of Healthy Aging on their website has links to it. Veterans benefits. If your loved one is a veteran, if you're a veteran, you could be entitled to a number of veteran services. Just be warned, I hope none of you are in here, but there's organizations that want to make you pay for things that you can actually apply for free. So if you have somebody coming to you, oh, your loved one is a veteran, I can help you apply for this program, it's going to cost you $1,000, put the brakes on, find out if you can do it for free. You know, unfortunately, there's a lot of unscrupulous people that are looking to take advantage of people in desperate situations. So if it doesn't sound right to you or doesn't feel right, do a little more research. You know, there's the aid and attendance waiver that can be really complicated to apply for, but you shouldn't need to pay for it to apply for it. Again, the Office of Healthy Aging is wonderful as well. United Way 211, The Point, they have a table here. Rhode Island Elder Info, I don't know if Deb is in the room, I saw her pop in. Their table is right out here. Rhode Island Elder Info has a website. They have information on just about every program in the state. If Deb doesn't know about the program, she'll find out about it for you. And she has 3 separate links on her website for seniors, for caregivers, and for professionals. So Rhode Island Elder Info is also a great stop for finding information on services throughout the state. Local support groups. How nice it would be to sit in a room full of people like today that have shared experiences. You know, sometimes you can't sit with your friends and talk about these things because some of the things that you're dealing with are really tough to talk about. You know, you have a group of friends that you always did things with. You're caring for your husband, and now you're having to change him when he's incontinent. That's not something you may want to bring to your friends, but you certainly could bring it to a group of strangers that are part of a support group that are sharing an experience with you. Senior centers, again, wonderful resources, you know, both for yourselves, for some of you, and for your loved ones. They have attached adult day centers, and they have programs that even if they're struggling with dementia, they can still join those programs. You know, Lori Manns was here today. She has the memory cafes that are at several of the senior centers. Those are wonderful experiences and references to be able to use. One program that I don't know, I didn't mention on here, it's an organization called CareLink, and they have a program working directly with dementia right now. So again, if you went to CareLink, I think it's .org, you can get some information on their program that they have for people, for families. It's an in-home program to be able to get occupational therapy services for your loved one. I know Lori Manns is here. I know she presented at one of the workshops today. And then there's powerful tools for caregivers. It's a wonderful, wonderful program. If you ever see it advertised, I would highly recommend. I actually went through the program myself. It's several weeks long. Quite often, they will actually have situations where you can have daycare for your loved one or care for your loved one, and that's another wonderful resource. So all these things combined, I'm coming to the end of my time, so I want to have a little time for questions and answers. And again, caregiving often calls us to lean in to love we didn't know was possible, from Tia Walker. So give yourselves, again, a great big hug, and if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And if you don't, that's great too. Thank you all so much. It was wonderful to be able to present to you today. Oh, there's one. Yay! She's going to come with the microphone, so I... Hold on one second. We'll put it on the microphone so other people can hear too. Thank you.
When I attended the conference a few years ago, one of the presenters touched on this, but we weren't there yet with my mother's progression. And she said, "Where's Fritz?" And we were away. My husband is here we took her to Florida after I went a few weeks by myself. My sister took her down. And 3 years now. And so I called the 800 number for Alzheimer's one night where she was going to try to get out of the house to get him. And that 800, that woman, at 11 o'clock at night, my husband said, "You're going to call him?" Talked us, my mother, off the wall, and she says, "You're doing great. Tell her, Fritzy, where can he be?" And I thought of my nephew, her grandson, and that he's safe. And I repeated everything. I didn't have a chance to process.
Yeah.
And that he was minding him. She uses that kind of language, said babysit.
Yep.
So anyway, that saved us that night. Now I have to approach my family and her grandchildren and my sister, who really aren't doing this 24/7.
Right.
And they feel it's a lie, and that I am perpetrating this because she's always going to ask for him. And I tried to explain the reading that she thinks she abandoned him, and he's starving, because that came out.
Yep.
I'm not home. So I think I've almost got everybody on board, but I had to switch him from being with her grandson, who's a very black and white type of person, who says it's a lie to my Nana and to her brother. So living the reality is the dog is still alive, and her brother is taking care of him. And this has been going on for 3 years. It doesn't come up every day, right, Warren? But it will come up minimum a couple of times a week. We're going on 3 years.
So your family, are these the same people that tell small children Santa doesn't exist?
No, I don't know. No. And this has been a long journey for my mother, very smart. They've had difficulty with this journey of losing her in that way.
Sure.
So she's very verbal, and when I say, and her brother will take a phone call, 8 o'clock at night, "Oh, he's over here playing with Mello," and then she forgets about it. So my question to you in all of that context is that, am I doing, is this ever going to end with the dog? And, and her brother's on board with it, and it's kind of a joke now. Yeah. And the people that I've kind of I can't argue. I don't have the energy.
I agree.
I gave them things to read. They don't want it. I can't. These are people that I love, and they love my mother. So I don't have the energy anymore. So I truly believe what I've done is the right thing, because my mother will then laugh, and she's happy again. It's the distraction, you know what I mean? And so...
You've answered your own question.
Okay.
If she is happy, even if it gives you 2 minutes of reprieve, then exactly what you're doing is what needs to happen. And unfortunately, there are going to be some people that are so idealistic and so black and white, they are not going to be able to do this, and they're just going to have a really difficult time caring for their loved one because, that person that's going to say to your mom, he's dead, oh my goodness, she's going to cry, she's going to feel awful.
She will, right?
Is that a better reaction than the lie?
Well, so
absolutely not. So, you could keep reminding your family. You could tell your family, I went to a workshop and a professional told me this. Or
right.
You could just keep doing what you're doing. You're doing exactly what needs to be done. And again, the outcome is exactly what you want. You answered your own question.
Yeah, and so the resource, the woman that I spoke with that night on the Alzheimer hotline said, live in her reality,
yep.
and then call me back. And the other question is, her mind, where she is, she accepts that my father passed away and said he was a good man and I loved him, but she's still looking for her mother, and I have to say she's in California visiting her sisters. I mean, why is that she's 86, her mother would be 120.
Honestly, her mother, I think our mothers give us a certain level of comfort that our spouses could never give. Definitely not in my case because I'm divorced, but I think that if we lean back to the love and support of our mothers, that's a natural place when we're scared for us to want to go to. So I would say when she's asking for her mom, there's probably something making her nervous inside. So maybe instead of saying she's in California, asking her to give memories. If you have pictures, show her some pictures.
Okay.
Ask her, did you need to go to the bathroom? Did you need a drink? Like, kind of distracting her rather than sitting with her in that moment, maybe distracting her a little bit from it because she's probably fearful and that's why she wants her mom.
Because you opened up with mom and dad.
Yeah.
So you're hearing that.
Yes.
Because
all the time.
Okay, so that is a fearful.
Yep. I had a resident in my last facility every day about 3 o'clock, you could set your watch. She needed to catch the bus because she needed to go see her father. Okay. So for me, obviously it was a locked unit. She wasn't going anywhere. I could let her wander, but she was so scared and so afraid. And I would say, oh, listen, mom and dad are fine. They're still at work. We're going to have dinner soon. Are you hungry? Hey, let me get you a cookie.
Okay, all right.
She'd be done with it. Just sort of meeting what that fear is. I knew that was her sundowning time. That was the time of day. Every day she got afraid. So I looked to, rather than sitting with her in it, distract her from it.
I want to thank you because these little practical, kind of like what I call ADLs, is why I'm here. Yep. I need to get through the day, but I need her stressless. I don't want my mother on a lot of meds.
Right.
I don't want that.
Right.
But you need to pass this on to the other people in her life with the story because she's not completely out of it.
No.
Because she'll catch you on it.
Try to share the resources as much as you can with your family. Keep throwing those articles at them from professionals, research articles, all that, because the research doesn't lie. That's what works. The reality orientation doesn't work. It just lands you in an even worse situation.
Yeah, well, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for working so hard for your mom. Yep. Sure, so it tends to be, she asked about sundowning. Sundowning for most people tends to happen. So again, you know how I was talking about environmental changes? So when the time of day begins to shift, sometimes people get this innate sense of maybe fear, probably because think about it, we're all going to be looking at our watches around 5 o'clock. That was the time of day we went home, or as a stay-at-home wife or mother, we got dinner ready. That's the time in our lives we were conditioned to start doing the next thing. So I think that's what ends up happening. That's sort of, to me, where sundowning really sits from, is that time of day. Even, like say in the winter, the sun is going down, so you see the changes. So some simple things to do with that are just to keep them, when you can set your watch by the time, before they're going to do that, get them engaged in some kind of activity. Maybe if they were someone that liked to cook, maybe get them in the kitchen, straining something or folding laundry or something to sort of cut it off at the pass. And then again, like I had mentioned to this woman, distractions sometimes can work too. Again, sometimes I know people, you talked about not wanting meds. Some people, medications aren't a bad thing. Remember that, because when this person is having this reaction and they get so worked up and they're so fearful and they're so afraid, they're hurting inside. If a medication can help reduce that hurt, and I'm not speaking for any pharmaceutical company, so don't ask me which meds, I will never say, but if you can give your loved one something that's going to reduce that pain and fear and anxiety, why wouldn't you want to do that? It's not a failure on your part that they need a medication, right? You wouldn't think you were a failure if you needed a medication because you had heart disease or you had, that feeling sometimes all goes back to the stigma of mental health and mental health awareness. I'm not equating Alzheimer's or dementia with mental health issues, but the need for medication is not a failure on your part, and sometimes they need that to really be able to feel better inside. So don't look at it as a negative. Yep. So sometimes either getting around it preemptively or giving them a distraction will help. You're welcome.
That 5-letter word. What help besides the little snippets? What helps with that 5-letter word of guilt?
So I think the most important thing is to, if you can, have a good network of support, right? Even if it's just a friend or somebody you can call on the phone and talk to, being able to verbalize what you're feeling inside and sort of get that out is really important, okay? That's one thing. Following up with any of the resources I mentioned, a support group, we're all gonna feel guilt. We're all gonna feel like we're letting them down, we're not doing enough. The fact that you're here means that you're doing a lot. So remember that you came here as a caregiver when you're feeling guilty and say, I took time out of my day where I could have been doing 100 other things because I don't know who has their loved one with them, some of you may, but you took time out of your day where you could have had some free time to learn more about bettering yourself for your loved one. So those simple things and those simple reminders, I think, any books, any online resources, things like that, but really I think human connection is the most important thing to relieving that guilt.
Great. I just want to say thank you to Stephanie. We are going to do a little bit of a break and then come back at 2:30, so that's in 5 minutes. Please get up and stretch your legs, and thank you, Stephanie.